Thank you very much, Chairman. Could I get a little more juice on the microphone? Yes. All right. So, Secretary General, Chairman of PDT. That's easier than. Yes, yes. Really. I'll get it. First time I'm hearing it and I'm seeing it, but I'll get it. Okay, I hear you. And certainly a warm welcome to everyone present, students, people related and members of CTO, people online, offline, physical, virtual. Really great to be here with you all this morning and to have been invited to share some thoughts on the theme, Adapt, Innovate, Evolve, Organizational Imperatives in an Era of Uncertainty. Sounds grand, doesn't it? Here's what I want you to do for me, to tell you how important that is. Just turn to the person next to you and say, adapt, innovate, and evolve. Adapt, innovate, and evolve. You know, these three word slogans, they ring very true, you know. There's something about them. And it reminded me as I was looking at that, I heard adapt, innovate, and evolve. And it reminded me of some work that was done way back in the 40s by Kurt Lewin. And he came up with something that we're all familiar with, where he says, unfreeze, move, and refreeze. Well, I have news for Kurt Lewin. In today's world, it is unfreeze, move, keep moving. There is no refreeze. We live in a world of churn, we live in a world of slush. And that's how it's going to be. We really don't have time to refreeze. That is a luxury we cannot afford. But interesting, you know, the word uncertainty, it struck me and says, you know, is uncertainty something about the environment or is uncertainty something about us? The environment is uncertain. Things happening out there. And because of the things that happen, we have our own reaction to that. And often it is a reaction of uncertainty. Uncertainty to things that happen, or uncertainty about what will happen, if anything will happen, and when. Monkeypox. A month ago, nobody was talking about it. Nobody was thinking about it. 2 months ago, 3 months ago, we weren't talking about war in Ukraine. 3 years ago, we were not talking about COVID. So what's the next thing? And that is where, not knowing what is coming down the pipe, that's where some of our uncertainty is. But we live in an era of rapid fire events. Things are going to come at us. And I'm not sure if it's a matter of age. You know, people tell me, you know, when you're young, you take your time going uphill. But once you reach the peak and you start to go downhill, you pick up speed. And it seems to me as though things just happening faster and faster. What's happening with you all? Faster and faster? Oh, so it's not me. Okay, I'm relieved. Thank you. But really, it is a world in which speed and change is just rapid and coming at us. And we live really in the era of the unknown. And that's where a lot of our uncertainty comes from. But what does uncertainty do? What is the impact of uncertainty? One, I'll talk about maybe about 4 or 5 of those impacts. There's a possibility of somewhere between panic and paralysis. So sometimes we panic in uncertainty and we just get busy. Anything that moves, we do it. All kinds of decisions, all kinds of activities, and that activity level goes up. The other end of the continuum is that sometimes we get paralyzed and we say, maybe we shouldn't do anything just yet. Let's wait. Let's see what will happen. So there's that kind sometimes of irrational decision making, and sometimes there's a kind of inflexibility and rigidity that comes on us. Let's do something, but it might be wrong. So that panic paralysis thing is something that is real, and it's in us as individuals, it's around the board table, it's in management, it just pervades the entire landscape in this era of rapid uncertainty. What it also does, uncertainty, is that it disrupts our assumptions. We used to assume certain things about the world. We knew that there was a time when you would go to school, study hard, get your degree, join a company, and you have your career, you get married, 2.5 children, wife, picket fence, a dog, and you live happily ever after. We know that that is not how it is. you're not going to get the dog. Okay, some of the other things might happen. But the truth is that our planning is challenged. What's the basis on which we plan? But while that disrupts us, think about the changing assumptions that we experience. It also frees us from the prison of history. But these were the assumptions. We've always done it that way. That's what we should do. But when assumptions are disrupted, we are no longer tied to those old ways, and we have to find new ways of evolving, adapting, and doing things differently. So this thing really invites non-traditional thinking, decision-making, and acting. What uncertainty also does is that it causes us to question the dream. Is our dream still relevant? Is our vision still relevant? Is the purpose for which we were formed still appropriate? Or does it mean that there's no hope? What's the point planning? Because, nothing will work out anyway and things will change. So we get that kind of issue where we question the dream, and sometimes that can demotivate us and move us further into that paralysis zone. Another impact of uncertainty is that we get into an era and a time of self-doubt, individually and organizationally. Can we cope? And sometimes we say, I'm not able with this thing. Now, this is too much. And we move into that helplessness zone and ask ourselves, how are we going to manage? And that can often at the individual and organizational level reduce engagement and motivation levels. And the last thing that's the ways in which I want to talk about uncertainty impacting us is in terms of relationship disruption. So in-house, in organizations, very often tensions start to come to the surface. Things that we were calm about before and that we would just push under the table or under the carpet suddenly start to come up because we are personally stressed. So individually and interpersonally, in-house, we have tensions and conflict. Externally, some things begin to happen with our customers and our suppliers because they too live in this world and this era of uncertainty. They too are struggling with trying to survive, trying to thrive, and to keep things going. So what might be some of our organizational imperatives? What should organizations do? And I looked with interest at your program and see that a number of things are going to be dealt with in much greater depth than I will do here. But I just want to introduce them. And as you go through the 2 days, reflect on some of these things because the ideas will resurface. One is that we have to turn our thinking on its head. Now, when we turn it on its head, we're not necessarily going to leave it there, but sometimes we need to see things the other way. Have you ever seen a picture of someone sitting on a horse and not facing the same way that the horse's head is facing? Now, if you think about that image, almost immediately we will say, but the person is sitting and facing the wrong way. But the person that's facing the right way is the horse that's facing the wrong way. Sometimes we have to really ask ourselves, do we need to change how we think, how we see things in today's world, and more importantly, for tomorrow's world? Times of uncertainty and change, what happened? Potentially, they are the most creative times in our life. So we might think this as a time of stress, a time of difficulty. But difficult times invite creativity. Picture this. You decide you want to change your ceiling because the ceiling doesn't look as nice as you thought it would. So you pull the ceiling down. But when you pull the ceiling down, you realize that some of the rafters are not that good. So you have to change those. And of course, if you have to do that, you're going to have to rewire. If you rewire and change the ceiling, you may as well put in some new fixtures. And having done that, you say, oh, I really messed up this floor. So maybe we should do something about the floor as well. And you do that. Then you look at the walls and say, well, wait, the walls no longer match the ceiling and the floor. And because you've opened the door to innovation and to doing something, there's the opportunity to do a whole lot of other things. If you don't believe me, your mechanic does it to you every time. There's a little squeak, and you told him, find the squeak, lubricate it, stop the squeak. You go in the afternoon, and he says, yes, I was able to stop the squeak. But I noticed that some of your belts were getting a little worn, and one or two of those tubes needed changing. And in other words, once you go in, it's a time to do a whole lot of other things. So what does this time really mean for us? We may need to look at this time as one of the more creative times in the life of your organization. Creation begins with disruption and destruction. Creation begins with disruption and destruction. You have a loan. Nice. You manicure that loan for months, for years even. But you want a deck. To get the deck, you have to destroy the loan. You have to dig something up. If we want something new, and many of us do, we need to disrupt and sometimes destroy what the old is. So what we have now in this time of uncertainty, and what organizational imperative we need to do is decide, how do I look at this thing differently? How do I turn my thinking on its head? It looks like a problem, it feels like a problem, but maybe this is a chance to change out some of the things that we needed to. This is a chance to revisit our business model. This is a chance to improve our technology. So turn the thinking on its head and look at it in a different way. Second critical organizational imperative, revisit the issues of relevance and purpose. Why did we start this organization? To bridge the gap across the Pacific. That's why we started the organization. What keeps us relevant? Is that still relevant? And the answer is no. But there's something else. Are there other gaps that we need to bridge? Are there other ways in which we can add value and for different people? So it is, how do we revisit this thing and ask ourselves, are we still relevant? Is our purpose still meaningful? And why is that important? When we have a sense of purpose, something comes with it. When we are working on something grand, something that is beyond us, even beyond our time, something cross-generational, and we know that there's this big picture, a way in which the world will be different because we are here and this organization is here, we have a kind of passion about that. And if we lose the big picture, it really comes down to the drudgery of day-to-day tasks. We must know that what we do today is not about today. This session here is not about today. Today is over. What we are doing here is sowing the seeds, planting those seeds for a different kind of future. And that kind of thinking, that big picture thinking and understanding the making a difference across generations, across space and time, creates passion for people. Now, I have a strange habit. I remember years ago when my children were already children. They, now people ask if I have children. I said, if I have kids, I said, no, I now have old goats. All right, they grew up. All right, but when my children were children, they would come and say, Daddy, what's the meaning of so and so? Standard answer, bring the dictionary. I grew up in an era when we used to do Latin and Greek in school. So I like to know where words come from and what's the meaning of what it really. Daddy, oh God, I'm tired with the Latin. Just tell me what's the meaning of the word. Bring the dictionary. Well, I learned the lesson myself, and one day I was doing some work on this issue of passion, and I went to the dictionary. Now, in today's world, what is passion? Excitement, energy, drive, enthusiasm, motivation, all that is passion as we think about it today. But I went to the dictionary and saw the root word for the word passion, and the root word is the word passio, a Latin word, which does not mean excitement or drive or enthusiasm or motivation, nothing like that. Passio means suffering and endurance. Be careful when you say you want to have passion. Suffering and endurance, as in the passion of Christ. But think about the two sides of passion. There is a side in today's world that is about excitement and drive, and we need to have a little enthusiasm when we come into work. But when we hit the wall, when the unexpected change comes, when the hill is so steep that we don't feel we can go any further, what keeps us going? And it is that deeper commitment to a purpose that is bigger than us. Something that is making a wider and broader difference in the world. And that thing says, that is so important that I am prepared to suffer, to endure, to go through the tough times, and make this thing happen. If it is just about us and our excitement, one rumor, one phone call, one stupid email, and that surface passion thing can burst. So let's understand that if we think about it, the imperative for organizations now is to revisit that big picture purpose and the relevance and understand the difference that we are called to make in the lives of people who we will never see, in the lives of people who may not yet be born. That's what we are working on today, and that ought to keep us going. The third organizational imperative I want to suggest is pause and reflect. Pull aside. Sometimes in organizations, we're so busy doing stuff. We're so busy moving on to the next task that sometimes we don't pause to celebrate the victories. There are good things that we are doing. If you look back over the last 2 years in your organization, you realize that there were some successes and things that gave us those successes. People worked together as teams, people volunteered, people helped one another, people brought their ideas to the table, people listened to the ideas that other people brought. Those things are happening all day, every day in organizations. But we're so busy moving on to the next task, looking up for the next event that's coming over the horizon to hit us, that we do not celebrate ourselves and our strengths. But sometimes the past is not only about all those good things that have happened. There have been difficulties in the past. There have been quote unquote failures. There have been targets that we did not meet. And we need to look at those as well. Understand why, but more importantly, ask ourselves the question, what kept us going? How come we still here? And it may be the power of prayer, the counsel of a colleague, somebody encouraging us pulling aside and just taking a breather and coming back. Something kept us going. And we need to know that even in the difficult times, we want to be able to surface those things that kept us going. For those of you who may be familiar with it, it's really an appreciative inquiry kind of approach, where we look at things and ask, what has happened in the past? And we ought not to be so concerned, scary, and uncertain about what's coming at us without taking the time to know that we have some ammunition, we have some energy, we have some successes, we have some things that can motivate us because we know we have done good things and we have been through some tough things, we've survived, we have tried, so let it come, whatever that next thing is. And that's important in a time of uncertainty. As I said, we also want to challenge our assumptions because assumptions can be very deceptive. They're comfortable, but they're so deceptive. I tell the story of doing business in an organization. And I have to go in there every Wednesday. I have to do business on the 5th floor. So I walk in, see a little panel on the wall, 2 buttons, arrow up, arrow down, press the button, a light comes on. A few seconds later, a door opens and there's a box in front of me. You call it an elevator. I step into it, another panel on the wall, I press 5, light goes on, the door closes, the box begins to move. A few seconds later, it opens and magically almost, I'm on the 5th floor of the building. And this happens every week. 1 week I go in, press the button, box opens, I go in, press 5, the door closes, the box begins to move and there's a thump, there's a bump, it shakes, it shudders, and the door does not open. It stops moving. 45 seconds later, 45 minutes later, they get me out of what was a stuck elevator. I'm soaking in sweat, claustrophobic and in a state of panic, and I rush out of the building. The next week, I come back to the building to do business on the 5th floor. What do I do? Something happened between last week and this week. Before last week, I was operating on the assumption that this thing would take me safely to the 5th floor and let me out safely. Now that assumption has changed on the basis of an experience. And because my assumption has changed, my behavior changes. I'm heading for the stairs. Now I want you to be careful about assumptions. An assumption does not have to be true for it to influence your behavior. Because the fact of the matter is, this week, that elevator is in better working condition than it was in last week. They adjusted the cables, they adjusted the tensions and the weights, they greased all the joints, they replaced some of the electronics, and the elevator is working better this week than in the weeks before I got stuck in it. But that, the truth notwithstanding, my faulty assumption is leading me to head for the stairs. Watch your assumptions. They may be faulty, but they're very comfortable and they're very comforting and may lead us down the wrong path. It means that we have to have an attitude of curiosity, of testing and pushing back at certain kinds of things. So the next organizational imperative I'd suggest is that we promote a posture of curiosity and vigilance, not paranoia, okay? A culture of curiosity and vigilance. We must ask probing questions. What if? Suppose, you know what happens to us as we, I'm not going to talk about age, this is the second time and the last time. I'm not going to talk about age anymore, but as we get older, as we age, something about our curiosity gets jaded. Something about the curiosity seems to die. I have a question for you. What is the color of that table at which you're sitting, the underside of the table? Okay, so you don't know. All right, fine. That's all right, you're excused. You're not as young as you used to be. But the legs of that table on which you're sitting, or the chairs, what does the leg of the chair taste like? You don't know, do you? If this was a room of 70 or 80 3-year-olds, they will be able to answer both questions. Why? Because they're curious. They will crawl around, they will put things in their mouth, they will see a little slit in the wall, stick their finger in it, and have a live experience of electricity. Okay? That's the way they are. But what happens to us is that we know so much. I mean, we've been to university, we've been trained, we did some PDT, you know, Peter, and of course we are now competent and skilled to it. So sometimes we stop asking questions. And I'm saying that we have to ask things about what's going on, and we have to not just ask questions, but we need to encourage and solicit questions from people. What do questions do? Questions unearth things. Questions start conversations. Answers end them. So let's begin to ask questions and poke around a little bit. And when we get it, and I think the Dean was talking about it, welcome other perspectives. And so somebody says, you know, I wonder if, and that kind of diversity is important. I speak to my people in the organization, I say, we need to have an opportunity eye. When you look at a situation, what's the opportunity in it? People say they read newspapers and they look for news. I'll tell you, every news item in the newspaper is something in the past. Every advertisement is about something in the future. I read ads. I don't read the news. That's gone. I want to know what is happening, who's doing what, who is planning what. One day there was this ad in one of our local newspapers in Trinidad, and it was for the bird sanctuary, and they were advertising the bird sanctuary. I had never seen these people advertise the bird sanctuary before. What does my mind say? I don't want to go to the bird sanctuary to see birds, all right? But when I see the ad, I say, why is he advertising? Maybe his company is in trouble and he needs to get some help. That's an opportunity for us. Well, maybe his company is doing very well and he's expanding. That's an opportunity for us. Whatever it was, when I look at that ad, I go behind it and look with an opportunity eye to see what else is happening. What is driving that? Because there's something behind it. And in today's world, we have to look at the surface of events, but we need to look behind them and ask what else is happening. So that kind of curiosity and that kind of vigilance is something that we need to inculcate and infuse and encourage in the culture of the organization. What we also want to do, another imperative, is to encourage what I consider to be strategic thinking, which will lead to strategic conversations. Now, we talk about strategic planning, and you know, it is, so what's going on? What should we do about it? We have introduced an intervening piece, which says, what's going on? What might it mean? And then what might we do about it? If I'm standing on the street and I see 600 people running down the street, screaming, their eyes open and rushing, some of them falling, getting up and running again, what's going on? People in a panic running down the road. What should I do? Run down the road too. Something bad must be happening. But if I found out that there were extras in a movie that's being filmed, what would I do? I'm not going to run. In other words, I have to put some meaning on the things that come up. I have to look at things and see not just what is happening, what should we do? What is happening? What are the implications for us, for our suppliers, for our customers? What else is happening? Is anybody else seeing the same thing? How are they responding to that? I have to ask some of those questions so I can interpret the situation and then get into the business of saying, what should we do about it? What that does is that it slows down the knee-jerk responses and it gives us a little more accuracy in terms of how we're interpreting and the kinds of decisions that we are making. Another organizational imperative I'd suggest is that we address this issue of duality, or as I've come to call it more and more, the question of plurality. You know, creation is an experience of opposites and duality. There's no in without out. There's no up without down. There's no light without darkness. And sometimes we look at those things and say, you know what, if this thing is so bad, if this thing is happening here, what is the other side of it? The truth is that change is a time of ambiguity. It's a time of uncertainty. It's a time very often of paradox. And we're not quite sure how to handle these things. We want to do something this way, but we're scared to do it. And we say, well, but we can't handle this ambiguity and this paradox. But we do. Our brains have the ability to handle things that are seemingly opposite. So listen carefully. Out of sight, out of mind. Absence makes the heart go fonder. He who hesitates is lost. Look before you leap. Many hands make light work. Too many cooks spoil the broth. We believe those 6 statements, you know, and we operate with them, but we treat with them in a situational way, and we therefore have the ability to manage and to treat with the ambiguity that change brings to us. So what do we have to do? There is going to be an element of holding on to what was, but there has to be some letting go. There will be some endings, but there will also be some beginnings. And we need to understand that and have that kind of thinking part of the culture and the ethos of the organization. So a quick test. This door here has a sign above it, a green sign, and I'm asking you, is this an exit or an entrance? It's both. All right, wonderful. Come to the front of the class. Next question. Be careful how you answer. What makes it an exit or an entrance?
Depends on which side you are.
Depends which way you're going. Go back to the back of the class. I'll tell you, when I walk towards the door from this direction, the moment I hit the door, it is an exit from this room. At the very same instant, it's an entrance to the lobby. Every day is an ending. Every day is a beginning. Every day we leave the past and we enter the future. And we have to be conscious of that it is not something we must know what is that. Hello, we live in a world of fluidity, a world of duality, a world of ambiguity. So we have to recognize that. And yes, it might be tough to leave some things behind, but you cannot hold on to everything that you've had. There'll be nowhere to put any new stuff. So you have to let some things go. Awkward, difficult, yes. Another organizational imperative, of course, is to develop change leadership. And of course, leaders have to develop themselves, manage themselves through it. They have to manage other people and they have to manage the intricacies of the change. But one of the things I like to say to people is that it's a lot more complex than that. When we talk change, it is not just the changes that are introduced in an organization. I introduce a change because I have an intent to create some new desired future. So I have a transformed organization in my head. I introduce a change to make that happen. Well, ask Moses about what his experience was. Moses had a vision and was told about the promised land, a place where he would take people, this brand new space where they would have a whole lot of things. And what was the change that they had to do? Pack up your stuff and leave Egypt. So they packed up and they left Egypt. And they were heading to the transformed state. But there was a desert. And the desert really represents the transitions that we all have to go through. 3 kinds of transitions. Change is fine, and most of us can implement the new system, the new structure, the new process. We can do that. We could dream and talk about what's happening down the road in terms of the transformed state and the desired future state. We can do that. How do we manage people through the desert? And change leadership requires that leaders and people be conscious of the 3 transition dimensions. 1, there's a human transition that has to take place. Attitudes, emotions, dealing with loss, dealing with uncertainty, being supported to make it through that time, learning some new skills. So there's a human transition. But there's an operational transition. As we shift structures and processes and things like that, job descriptions, there are some operational things we're going to have to do differently. Maybe different people will be reporting to different people. Maybe for a period, we'll have to run one old paper system while we're introducing the digital system, and that has to go on for a while. That's temporary, it's transitional, but it has to be done. And then there is a deeper cultural transition that the organization has to go through. How do we deal with those fundamental beliefs in the organization, the ways we see ourselves, how we think and how we believe and relate to our customers, our suppliers, our colleagues, those kinds of things. Not the culture that is the polo shirt and the logo and the cap and the family day. That's not the culture. That's as she would say, the artifact level. But the deeper things inside there, what values we espouse and what are the behaviors? How do we say to people, hey, that's not how we do it around here. We used to do that, but not now. Okay? So as we do that and we move on, we say change leadership. And in closing, let me say that the last organizational imperative is about promoting partnerships. We're not going to do this thing alone. We're not going to make it by ourselves. So we have to, as organizations, to reach out to our stakeholders, our partners, to the environment, other kinds of interest groups, because whatever organization you're in, you're not standing alone. So I invite you to unfreeze, move, keep moving. I invite you to adapt, innovate, and evolve. Initiating and executing organizational imperatives, not in an era of uncertainty, but in an era of opportunity. Thank you very much.